Today on Morad Media, I'm going to expose the corruption of the African American judges and the political leadership who's delivering favor to the Jewish billionaire developers and to the Jewish lobbyists and working hand in hand with the U.S. government and abandoning their own community, which I have witnessed in the past 25 years, how the African American community has been living under oppression, under gentrification, and they've been treated as a second-class citizen. As an Arab American who came to this country, to America in 1958, 50 years ago, I was not aware of the racism and the double standard between the poor and the rich. Unfortunately, I was able to document this and witness it by buying a development of 281 units in 1981, consisted of 22 buildings and houses 1,500 African American, blacks, and Hispanics. So I had a little city to experiment and to see if I could make a difference for the African American residents and how I could turn my developments into their American dream, which is tenant ownership. So as a developer, I thought I had a little city where I could set precedents on a national level, and I could set up a model so we could basically turn all these developments that the Housing and Urban Development owns, millions of them, started giving them to the private Jewish developers for $1 and make a killing, that these developments will be turned into tenant ownership and they will be given into the residents' first option versus private developers. So I became controversial in the city of Boston, Massachusetts. Once I bought that development from HUD, there was a serious retaliation for me for initiating programs and renaming the place Mandela after Nelson Mandela when he was in prison in 1987. And the purpose of the name was to support his freedom and the discrimination that's going on in South Africa and the white government. And the other one is to support the incorporation that is called Mandela, and to take part of the communities that it's the 12 acres, the 12 square miles, and there was a referendum with several thousand signatures to separate portion of that city into the Mandela Incorporation, and the name, that's how the name was originated. As our approach as a developer, would I back up the movement? I said, yes, I will. I backed them up financially, as well as renaming the development into Mandela. To see the information about the renaming and the back history of the Mandela development, where I became a victim, and I became indigent and homeless for taking a stand behind that sign that says Mandela. CNN has covered the Mandela Incorporation, and you could go on my video, Morad Protest, and you could click on President Nelson Mandela picture on the front page of the www.bostonmandelascandal.com, and that will give you all the background. And I wanted to really establish foundation for the Mandela ownership, so I created the Mandela Town Hall, which America was built in town halls and they became city halls. I created the Mandela Research Center. I started the Mandela Youth Program and the Mandela Rowan team. So I had a little city I was very proud of, and I wanted to give it all my creation in order to really make those residents living in the American dream, and that is to own it, to manage it, and to set up a model on a national level. So the government tried to put me on receivership because the name Mandela depreciates the assets of Boston. They did not want to separate the city because the Jewish developers will not expand rebuilding Boston and put an annex to downtown Boston on the acres of land that's been held by the city for 30 years in order to develop them to become a new elitist city annexed to Boston. So therefore it was very important for them to put me in receivership and to take over the Mandela developments and to dismantle the sign, dismantle the programs, and to basically turn it over to the Jewish Zionist billionaire who will create an annexed city to downtown Boston and will displace the last black culture. That all has taken place, and you could click on a picture of Henry Cisnero of the Housing and Urban Development, how HUD was racist to me. They will not allow me to refinance, and they will not give me rent increases, and they squeezed me out joining in with the government and the Jewish developers to phase me out and turn the property over to Beacon Residential Property, which is Howard Cohen, who's the owner today of the Mandela Developments, and he's the one who's taken over a portion of that city, and they invested already over $1 billion in the city of Boston. So there is a market going on right here in America toward the gentrification and displacing the African American blacks out of Washington, D.C., Chicago, Philadelphia, and you could go across the whole nation. The principle is the same theory as what's happening in Palestine. It's no different from adding new settlements into Gaza and the West Bank, and the takeover over there is by force by the army and the bulldozers moving them. Here the takeover is by rubber stamp by the judges. Unfortunately, if the African American judges and the politicians who stood with me to save Mandela, I wouldn't have been into foreclosure, and I wouldn't have been today indigent, homeless, and the tenants would have had the American dream. But instead, who put Mandela into a foreclosure, and who basically rode the red carpet to the Jewish Zionist billionaire to take over Mandela? It starts with first judge, African American judge, Judge Spurlock. You could click on his picture on the front page under the BostonMandelaScandal.com. He allowed a foreclosure, was on a fraudulent note. The note was satisfied. He knew under foreclosure Mandela will go into auction and the tenants will be displaced. But he had to deliver a favor. Ironically, Judge Spurlock, prior to this foreclosure, he recused himself on my corporation, V&M Management, that his wife works for the Attorney General's Consumer Protection, and I was under investigation and would be a conflict of interest. But on that day, he allowed the foreclosure to go forward. To go into the Attorney General motion for receivership, you can click on the picture of Scott Harshbarger, and that will give you in 1994 how the government tried to take over first and put me into a foreclosure. Then after that, I tried to seek refuge in the bankruptcy court, and the Jewish judge Carol Kenner, she allowed the Jewish trustee to depreciate Mandela appraisal to $100,000. It was going to go to auction. I brought in $5.5 million, and she would not give me my property back. It's shocking. You can click on the picture of Judge Carol Kenner. Now, the one who originally did also the foreclosure on the state court was Judge Maria Lopez. She resigned for corruption. You can click on her picture, and you can see all the documentation. It's very shocking under her button. Also, Judge Carol Kenner barred me out of the bankruptcy court for life for filing a motion as a pro se. She did not give a hearing or a reason or a trial. Of course, that's how Arab immigrants treated in America as a second-class citizen when they go up against Jewish billionaires who's trying to rob them, just like in the Middle East. There's no difference. What's happening in Palestine and Israel is happening here. The only difference here, the African American political black leadership They are in the pocket of the Jewish developers, serving their personal gain, their personal promotions, and that's the only way they could become part of the American dream and part of the wealth. And for them to become millionaires and billionaires, you have to basically be part of the team. You got to join in. This is how you get your working capital. So become part of the Jewish billionaires, help them out, help the Jewish lobbyists, and take your orders. So basically what I see in here, African Americans, they fought for the first 100 years to get out of slavery. At least they know who the masters were, and they were successful. But now I see a new trend in the past 2 decades. I call it legalized slavery. So right now, to be politically involved, you have to take your orders from the bankers, which are Jewish media and the Jewish funding, and therefore they control you. So are you really free? You're not free. And that's why these communities are living under oppression, and that's why they manifested by drugs, crimes on the increase. We have 1 million prisoners right now in America, African American, and we have today turfs of gangs. And the question, why would you have in America that the gangs taken over the curve if there is a government? You can only take over the turf if there's an absentee government, because the government allows them to go ahead and be able to create gangs and get the drugs in the community, move the good citizen out, create crimes, and eventually arrest them, put them in jail, and that's how you take over their neighborhood. Because what happened in part of the cities, the land they live on, it becomes a golden land. And when the city expanded and they need the land to build high-rise buildings, 4-star hotel, convention center, and generate employment for the white elitists and generate revenue for the government. So therefore, the market is to go ahead and gentrify the African American neighborhoods. And this way here, you win both ways. By building more jails for them, you could appropriate billions of dollars for a cause everybody support for crime, and then you employ more probation officers and judges and the white elitists, and therefore that's a market by itself. If America today don't have the crime and the jails they're building and 1 million prisoners supporting, we'll go into deeper recession. They can't afford not to have jails in America. That's how they make a living for the white elitists, and that's what the government supports and justify for the taxpayers. So it's sad what happened to me with the 3 judges. I mentioned Judge Spurlock. Now I go into Judge Lindsay. Judge Lindsay, when I was arrested, was a fraudulent arrest. The bankruptcy court was closed. I went in by the order of a state judge to get a docket number so I could respond to a motion was transferred. A lawsuit was transferred back to her. Judge Kenner, she hidden the file in her chamber, and I went to the clerk office to get the docket number, and the U.S. Marshal said, you cannot enter the floor. I said, the case is dismissed 2 years ago, and I just want the number and I'll leave. And the Marshal said, let me talk to the clerk to get you the number so you could leave. He talked to the clerk. They couldn't find the number because Judge Kenner had it in her chamber. And then he went in to talk to her, spent 20 minutes with her, and then when he came out, he said, Murad, you're under arrest. So she basically arrested me. So on the trial, I subpoenaed her, and would you believe it? You can click on this picture. Judge Lindsay squashed her subpoena. She's a main witness. In the meantime, the U.S. Marshal, the gentleman, he basically committed fraud, and he said, I walked in to be arrested. He did not basically tell the whole truth. Now, do I look like a fool? I walk in after the case is closed, after 2 years. Walk in there and says, I'm here to be arrested. What's the purpose? I mean, I'm a high-profile case. I've been in the media. You look like a nut. You look like you need to be hospitalized when you walk in without a cause, without a reason, and carrying a transcript in your hand why you're walking in the court. You have to have a reason. I know that much. But the judge knew that. Then the U.S. attorney wanted to put me on probation, to put a leash on me, like you would do to a dog, so I cannot file any more motions or write the press releases or be activist as a minority. So therefore, I told the judge, I will take 6 months prison and I will not take probation. He did not want the publicity. If I go to prison, then we'll open up the whole Boston Mandela scandal.com, and we'll open up 10 corrupt judges being on my cases. So therefore the judge knew better, and he said, pay $10, Morad, and walk out of here, and later on pay $1,000 fine, whatever you can. Because he knew he couldn't live with his conscience, and he knew he could not basically put me in prison because the media would have a field day. So these are my experiences with those 2 African American judges. The third judge, way back, you could click on Mayor Flynn lawsuit, where she committed extortion, trying to make a deal on behalf of the African American black would benefit the white sector. And therefore I filed a lawsuit against them. And the African American judge, Herman Smith, you can see his judgment there. He was a housing court judge. He had no jurisdiction over that case. They moved that case from the Suffolk Superior Court to him. He sat on it for 2 years till he got a promotion. And then when he was promoted to the Suffolk Superior Court, then he dismissed it. I mean, this is really shocking. Then my attorney was an African American attorney, deceased Ron Brown. He tried to get me a loan through HUD. I know Ron very well. And he said, I'm proud of what you're doing for the residents. He came to the Mandela Town Hall. He complimented me, and he said the national should come down and see what you're doing. And he got a loan approved for $7 million. HUD rejected it here, sent it to California, and Ron Brown did not deliver that loan. He could have saved Mandela. He could have saved Al Morad. But clearly, the political leadership here, Senator Kerry was involved. You could click on his picture. The tenants who met with him for tenant ownership, no deal. Deceased Senator Kennedy, he knew about Mandela written to him, no deal. Governor Salucci, you can click on his picture, no deal. Governor Dukakis, I brought in a loan and we were going to close it, and I had the money on the table the day before. They rejected it, and he didn't care because he's the one also gentrifying Lower Roxbury, helping Northeastern University and the Longwood Medical Center. So all of them, they were involved to take over the Mandela Incorporation. And well, I don't mind the Jewish Zionist developers what they're doing. They're trying to build a new city, just like the West Bank in Gaza, and generate billions of dollars and hire the white elitists at the expense of the blacks. I have no problem with that. I have a problem at the end. I became a victim to the African American judges who rolled the carpet and the politician. You can see Senator Diane Wilkerson, who just been arrested and indicted. I don't know how many years she's serving. You can see Chuck Turner, city councilor. They were all involved in Mandela. So all the African American political desks who, when I had money, they were supporting me, at the end, they rolled the carpet to the Jewish Zionist developers with the blessing, take it over, let's get more of that out, and let's convert this development into a new city, and let's basically get rid of the name Mandela. It's amazing in 1987, Nelson Mandela was under the terrorist list in America. So everyone here is saying we honor the President Nelson Mandela. There was some articles in the Boston Herald I read when Nelson Mandela recognized the racism in America, mainly to the African American community. He's no fool. He understood when he came to Boston. Would you believe they would not let him go in front of the building because they don't want the national media to take a picture of the sign and to show there is a Mandela movement in Boston? They went around it, and the tenants demonstrated on the city hall, and they had a press releases, and they were quite upset. So I warned the Middle East, be careful when the African American leadership go over there. They're not their own. They have no control. They're only messengers to the Jewish lobbyists, to their finance, to the Jewish media, and if they're going to make it further, they have to support them. They take their orders. They don't have the power, self-empowerment themselves, to make the decision, and that's why I believe today what goes around comes around. The Middle East right now is in a process of democracy. I hope we keep our own democracy, and we don't need the West democracy. Keep America out of there, and keep the African politician out of the Middle East, because they are serving the Jewish lobbyists, and they're not serving our best interest. Thank you.